Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Treasure Coast Solutions every Wednesday from 9 to 10 o'clock. We talk about some of the issues, some of the economic issues that may affect you here locally or nationally, some of the things that, you may hear about and wonder, gee, is that really true? Or, how do they do that? The show is a little bit about kind of pulling the curtain back and showing you the wizard. It's a little bit about how a lot of stuff is said, little smoke and mirrors, but economically just not possible. And that's what we talk about, is just some of the things that, and it's everyday things that affect you, and why they affect you and how they're going to affect you and what difference it makes. So it's kind of important to understand some of that. My name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a local CPA. I'm an ex-banker. Have been in practice here as a CPA for some 20 years, and have also had a little bit of background in economics and tax, and some of the differences between economic tax and regular taxes and some of that type of thing. The purpose of the program is really just to talk about some of those issues that maybe people, I think, understand or question, but don't really, maybe haven't had an exposure to economics or to some of the issues behind the issues. And that's kind of, it's unfair a little bit that we don't have more discussion of economic issues, because we allow people to vote and have a say in how the country's run. Yet many times people vote based on promises that are impossible to keep because they don't exist. You can't do it. And if you understand that, then you can kind of boil it all down and maybe look at some of the things that the people are telling you and say, okay, that makes some sense. I understand how they're going to do that. Or, that's just somebody really lying to me and giving me free stuff so that I'll vote for them and they'll get elected. And politics is about free stuff, no matter which side of the aisle you're on and what you're doing. It's all a quid pro quo type concept. Do this and I'll do that. Now, sometimes what they're offering to do makes sense and they can actually do it, and it will actually be a good thing. So there's nothing wrong with quid pro quo. I vote for you if you do this. And as long as this is possible and legal, and not to the detriment of the rest of the country, then that's a good thing. But there's also, you vote for me and I'll do this, and what they're saying they're going to do is smoke and mirrors. It's it's hidden. It's actually going to do the opposite potentially, and that's the thing that we talk about on this show, is just some of those issues. It is a show that if you want to call in, 220-9788, 220-WSTU, we'll be happy to talk to you and maybe get some of your thoughts on the air and even discuss some of these issues if the time comes, or if you want to. I am not an economics professor, so but I sometimes think that that's a little bit of a good thing, because as an accountant and a CPA, I do look at things differently from an income standpoint and an expense standpoint, but I also look at it from the economic standpoint, which is a different calculation of income, so it's a little bit different approach. But one of the things we've been talking on the last few shows about some of the issues, and one of the things that I've kind of been harping on a little bit is this concept that we're going to tax the corporations because they need to pay more tax, and anybody that's listened to the show for a while understands that corporations can't pay tax. You can put whatever kind of tax you want on them. They can't pay it. There's no way they can, because to pay the tax, it becomes a cost of theirs, just like reduced taxes are reduced costs. So if I ask a corporation to pay a tax, they have to do one of two things. They have to reduce one of their other costs, which is typically labor or materials. They have to reduce one of those costs. And in that process too, kind of the materials is all, or the labor is also technology. They have to, they may have to reduce their technology costs, which if those reduce productivity, then at the same time it may not be effective. They may not be able to do that. They may have to reduce something else. Sometimes they increase technology to be able to reduce labor more than the technology, because technology a lot of times has an upfront cost. So let's take McDonald's. McDonald's is doing that right now. They're all for a higher minimum wage. That they'll support that because it doesn't cost them a dime. They're going to pass that along in the form of either reduced labor costs. They're going to fire people and reduce their labor, presuming they can still produce the same and sell the same amount of product. Or they're going to try to raise price, which probably they're not going to be able to raise price because people are only going to pay so much for a McDonald's hamburger, or they go to Wendy's or they go to Burger King. So the bottom line is, it's probably in their situation, it's probably labor. Initially they might try to go to a cheaper materials, cheaper meat, cheaper fries, cheaper oil, that kind of thing. But then if that impacts the product quality, then that's going to affect price, and ultimately they're going to have to make another adjustment, because they will, again, their profits will be down. And why can't they just reduce profits? Why can't the owners, just take less profit? They should share. They're the fat cats. The people that own McDonald's are the fat cats, and they should pay. Well, yeah, no, they're really not. The people that own McDonald's are you and me and everybody else. Anybody who's got an IRA has probably got McDonald's in it. Anybody who's got a retirement plan, 401k, any union has got an investment in McDonald's. So are you saying that? So what you're saying is that we should pay. And that is one of the secrets. That is one of the secrets about the sleight of hand that occurs between the politics and the economics. The politics is, we're going to make the big corporations pay. The economics are that isn't going to happen, because the owners of those corporations are shareholders who are typically average investors. That's people's retirement money. That's what they're using to live off of. That's what they're going to use to live off of. That's what they're putting away. If you're young, that's what you're putting away, because there won't be any Social Security. So that is, so it's not damaging the fat cat. It's not taking money away from wealthy people and giving it to those who most need it. The fact of the matter is that most of the people that are being impacted are the working poor on both sides of that equation. And so, what McDonald's is going to do, and has already done, is they've implemented kiosks. You see this at Taco Bell. I kind of, it's kind of ironic that you look at some of this stuff and you go in and you wonder, don't the people think about this? So I have to go into one of my weaknesses is Taco Bell. So I ended up going to Taco Bell the other day, ordering like 12 hard shell tacos, whatever the deal is. But I go in there, and there is, right as you first walk in the door, are these kiosks where they encourage you to go and place, go through the menu, place your order yourself, and get that, and take care of all of that. And then there up at the counter is this person who's very happy and upbeat, and was just learning the job. At this last time was just learning. They were new and they were just learning the job. And I'm thinking, does it dawn on them that they're staring at their replacement? That, it's kind of like, it's like sitting there and and realizing every single day when you walk in that that kiosk is there to eliminate your job. It's like if you were going into your office every day and and when you showed up somebody else was sitting in your chair, and you're still there, they haven't fired you and you're still doing the job, but that person is doing the exact same thing you're doing. They're there to help people do the exact same thing that you're there to help people to do. uh and and you're they've already been paid for. There's no extra money to them. Wouldn't you get nervous if your replacement was sitting next to you every single day for, say, a year or two? Wouldn't you get a little bit nervous about it? I mean, it has to be depressing. But the good thing is that I don't think people think about it. They don't realize that that technology that's out there in the kiosk to order the tacos is eventually going to be the same technology that they can already implement, that's going to make the tacos, that's then going to put them on some sort of a bin where somebody is going to take them to you or hand them to you or bag them up and get them ready for you. In fact, they're already bagging them up so that you don't have to touch them now with the coronavirus. So think about it. The coronavirus here is potentially going to increase the demise of those entry level jobs. So when you start talking to the big companies about we need to go to a $15 minimum wage from the current 10 or whatever it is nationally, they don't cringe because they don't intend to hire those people. They intend to get rid of them. They're not going to ever pay that minimum wage. They're going to fire those people because they don't need them. They've replaced them already with technology. And what's happening in McDonald's and in Wendy's and in Taco Bell and all these other places is that technology already exists. They don't have to come up with it. They thought about it and and came up with it and developed the concepts, the process, the technology. They developed it years ago. They've been working on it for years. Why? Because constantly they knew that labor is more expensive than technology in the long run. But there was just no incentive because in the short run, it was cheaper. But now if you change that, if you all of a sudden raise your minimum wage so that the person that's working at Taco Bell or McDonald's can make a livable wage, which was never the intention of that job. That job was never intended to be a job that people aspired to pay to raise a family of four. That never was the concept. Those jobs were temporary jobs, temporary labor. They were entry-level jobs where somebody was just learning how to work, not just learning how to work at McDonald's, just learning how to work. And the good jobs, so to speak, the jobs that people would try to attain were the management positions where you learn some responsibility. You go to McDonald's University in Chicago, and you learn how to run a McDonald's, how to be a manager. The skills that some of these people learned, and let's face it, in many cases, it was African American, Hispanic, and low income. And they were jobs where people got their first opportunity to get on that first rung of management to move up. And that helped your resume. Let's face it. I worked at places like that. I didn't have money when I grew up. I had to get one of those jobs. And I remember the job that I had one summer managing a detasseling crew in the Midwest was the job that got me on the rung. I could put something on my resume and say, have you ever had any experience supervising people? Yes, I did this. Have you ever had any opportunity to manage anything? Yes, I managed this. That's what that job is about. It's not about feeding a family of four. It is about giving the person the opportunity to get the next job. And McDonald's next job is a management position, which again doesn't pay big money, but it gives you experience. It gives you a resume. And then the opportunities beyond that in terms of buying a franchise or whatever, or understanding whether you're really interested in that, those opportunities then come along and are higher paying opportunities. but the minimum wage was always a problem, and was always never going to be a problem for them because they were going to eliminate labor. And it's already possible for McDonald's to be able to instantaneously implement a program that eliminates all of those people. You'll have roughly probably a manager whose job will be to kind of open and close the store and make sure that the food's that none of the technology is being messed up. They can call a repair person. They can take care of that. They're not going to be managing many people, and they're not going to manage many high skilled level people. They're going to be managing people who are basically just taking food once it's prepared and delivering it either to the counter for somebody or the drive-up window for somebody to get it or to the table for somebody to eat it. So that's all you're going to have is a couple people. Frankly, they could probably do it with less, but they'll have to have more than that just from security standpoint because they won't be able to be open with money in there without more than a couple people in there. So that's what's going to happen. Those jobs will be eliminated. So because they're not sustainable. McDonald's can't raise the price. That's the inflation concept. That's how most corporations would defeat this issue, is if they had a monopoly. If there was only one fast food restaurant in the chain in the world and it was all McDonald's, they'd just raise their prices. They wouldn't do any of this. They wouldn't implement any of the technology. There's no use spending that money in the short run because it's not a problem anymore. You can pass the cost along. But what's happened right now with many, many companies is that they've reached the point where they have already reduced their costs, non-labor costs, but they've already reduced their non-labor costs to a level that's as low as it can go. And that's been done primarily by buying foreign products, cheap products. We buy Chinese, we buy, cheap international products. We use international labor to the extent we can, call centers, things like that. So what we've already done is reduce those costs to levels that are not, are well below, well below the levels that they're at now, or that they would need to be if you start paying a minimum wage and all of that. Think about the big companies, the financial institutions, the computer companies, the technology companies. When you pick up a phone and call, who do you get? Well, you get a call center, right? And that's, it's not being, those call centers have been offshored. They're all outside the United States in general. They have a bank of people, potentially supervisory people in the United States that may work at the headquarters where they, are referred to jobs, or referred to the more difficult issues, but try to get referred to one of those. That defeats their purpose. They're not going to refer you to their supervisor because unless that supervisor is in the call center, because that defeats their purpose. And so what, no matter what you can talk about, you can complain about the fact that, I can't understand what they're saying, which is true. Some of them you can, but they don't understand, and they don't understand because they're not in the same, they're not living the same lifestyle. They don't understand all of the things that you may reference. And so it makes it difficult. The cultures are different than our cultures. But many of them have assimilated, and frankly, the companies are okay with that. The companies that utilize them are okay with the fact that there may be a little inconvenience on the part of the consumer. Why? Because that person isn't going to cost them $10 an hour. They're not costing them $15 an hour. They're maybe costing them 30 cents an hour. If in some cases that's what you're talking about. And that's, you don't make that up. I don't care what you're doing. You can't recover that by, if you've already reduced your labor costs to that level, there's no more way you can reduce your labor costs any longer. And that's what a lot of these companies have done. So, like I said, it's a shell game to some degree. So what you got to do is step back and watch, where the P ends up. And most of the time it's up somebody's sleeve, not even on the table. And that's what's confusing about this process, and makes it difficult. So So let's talk minimum wage. There's a lot of discussion about minimum wage and how it needs to move to $15 an hour. That's the proposal that was made by the House, and so I'm going to either, as I always say, either the politicians in the House are stupid, or they're liars. But I don't think there's any other choice. They either don't know what the impact of what they're proposing is, and I just don't think that's true, or they do know, and they know what the outcome is going to be, and they don't want to tell you because they don't want to show you where the pea is going to be under which shell. It's up their sleeve right now, and that's where they want it. So, and here's what I mean by that. If we can arbitrarily move, as they say, move the minimum wage to $15 an hour, why can't we arbitrarily move it to $70 an hour? I mean, why should people have to settle for a minimum wage income, even if it's livable, but barely livable? Why not, aren't all those people racist or prejudiced or whatever? Because these jobs many of these lower income jobs are entry-level jobs, and they're jobs that are being taken by young people, and they're prejudiced towards it. They don't need to make money. They don't need to make more than this amount of money. Or, maybe they're newly into the country. Maybe this is an entry-level job into the country where they've moved here, they're immigrants, and that's an entry-level position. So, which is the way the country has always been. Most entry-level positions, most positions that nobody wants, are filled by immigrants. That's the way they were. The Italians, they were the Irish, they were the Chinese. Historically, they've all been African Americans. They've been all filled by immigration. Good immigration, bad immigration, whatever immigration. They've been filled by immigrants. Those are the ones. So are we racist? Because why are we saying that it's only right for them to have a livable wage? Let's make them have a fantastic wage. Why don't they just have a wage that's way, way more than minimum? Let's pay them $70 an hour. I think probably you could live okay on a individual salary of of $140,000 a year. So why are we being so unfair and so cruel to limit them to $15? Why don't we just make it $70 an hour? I think I'm in favor, and in fact, if I'm elected, I will make minimum wage $70 an hour. That's the minimum wage that everybody will be paid. So you should vote for me. Why wouldn't you vote for me? Because I'm proposing that. Right? It's ludicrous, right? Because you're all thinking the same thing. Well, that's ridiculous. Nobody could afford that. The companies couldn't pass. Nobody could. It's the same concept at $15. If the wage is the legitimate wage for that type of job is $11 an hour, it's $11 an hour. And the bottom line is, by saying it's 15, that isn't happening. You can't make that happen arbitrarily. You cannot. Something else has to shift economically. Money has to come from other people to support that. So either we have to tax somebody that's making more money. The corporation has to shift their costs around so that they now need less of that $15 or $70 an hour. Maybe if we did what I'm talking about, let's say we mechanized all of our operations. We have no people at all. We've already got sunk costs in all of the technology. It's efficient. We're buying scrap meat. We're buying wilted lettuce, whatever. We're doing whatever we can. We got that thing as cheap as we can. I'll bet you we could afford to pay $70 an hour to the few people that are left. I can pay $140,000 a year if my product is costing me, 2.5 cents. Besides that, I'm paying 2.5 cents and I'm selling it for $2 or $3. Now, most likely, with the wilted lettuce and the tomatoes and the onions that I've cooked but can't still make them taste good, I'm still gonna have a hard time getting $2 a burger, no matter what I call it, how big of a Whopper it is, or how big of a Whether it's a quarter pounder, a half pounder, or 3/4 pounder, it's still lousy meat at that point. So am I going to, be able to sell it? No. But if I could, I could afford to pay the people that are left, the 2 people that are left in the store. I could probably pay them 140 grand a year. One of them is probably going to be the owner. So of the franchise. So what I'm getting at is that why don't the politicians offer a higher number? Because I'm not worth it? Because I'm poor, so I'm only entitled to $15? If they can make it happen just by saying it's going to happen, why don't they make it happen at $70 an hour? So the next time you hear somebody say, we're raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, then sit back and think and say, well, wait a minute. Well, then why aren't they proposing $70 an hour? And I know the answer to that. They're racist, prejudiced. They don't like immigrants. They don't like the people that they don't really care about those people. Those people don't deserve more money than that. They deserve a livable wage, but not a good wage, just a livable wage. So think about that. Think about that every time that person is on their high horse talking about how they care. Think about what they're really saying and why they're not offering $70 an hour. Because that's what they should be saying. If they're going to lie to me, lie big. At least, otherwise I can't figure it out. That's why I say they're either liars or stupid. I don't think they're stupid. So what happens? What happens when I've heard a couple comments relative to minimum wage and why it makes sense to raise the minimum wage. And why that all works. And the first concept is that the minimum wage, if we raise the minimum wage, people will have more money to spend. They will have more money to spend on other items, and therefore that will produce a boom to the economy, because that money will go back into the economy and it'll be purchased in goods and services. Now, let's step back and think about that and talk about that, because that on face makes sense, right? But here's where I have my problem with some economists. They basically want to get you to focus on the in-between process, the shifting process, and they don't want you to focus on the end result. And that's why I say sometimes economists make economics way more complicated than it needs to be, because the economists always are analyzing the shifts in between, because they know when they step back, they know what the outcome is ultimately going to be. What they're hoping is that in the interim, they can somehow impact that outcome. They know they probably can't change it, but they may be able to postpone it. And so that's what they're looking at, because if they can postpone it, particularly if they work with politicians, they can get to the next election and get through the next election so that it's no longer an issue. Then they can always go, oh, sorry, I didn't see that coming. Well, we saw it coming, but we really didn't. We didn't know that would happen. And then they'll give you all kinds of economic reasons why it didn't, why it shouldn't have, and how it's probably not permanent, probably. But let's talk about H.W. Bush. Read my lips. No new taxes. There was a case of an economist advising him on a situation that obviously wasn't going to happen, because what did happen? We needed new taxes, right? Because they promised more than they could fulfill out of the economy, and they borrowed to do it. And at some point, when you borrow, you have to pay it back. You either have to pay it back by raising taxes so the government has more money to pay it back. You have to take more money from the consumer. It ultimately will reduce output, reduces gross national product, stops the economy or slows it down, and then ultimately it kind of spirals down out of control, and which is exactly what happened, and the reason that there was no second term, for Mr. Bush, and that's why it was just a case of a politician believing an economist, and they should have known better. They definitely should have known better. So, but they figured by the time it happened, nobody would care, but we did. So that's that's one of the issues that we have, is that the economists tend to focus on the short run. So they'll say, oh, they're going to have all this money, so they're going to be spending that money. And here's the thing. There's a thought that spending money boosts the economy, saving money does not. That's absolutely wrong. And that's where, economists, this sleight of hand. That's why they want to call some of this stuff investment, because they want you to believe that if you spend money, it's a good thing. Even if you borrow the money to spend the money, it's a good thing. Savings is a bad thing, because they say it takes money out of the economy. It takes money out of circulation. And so therefore, savings is bad, spending is good. So if I give money to people who are going to spend rather than people who are going to save, that's good for our economy. Now let's step back and think about that. Let's try to boil that down. If that works overall, it should work individually, right? I mean, if it's good for the country to not save, to borrow and spend, then shouldn't that really work for the individual? So shouldn't every individual, if we want the country to be as good as it can be, shouldn't every individual borrow as much money as they can, not save it, spend it as rapidly as they can, so that we boost the economy, right? Isn't that the good thing? What's going to happen when we do that? Well, everybody knows. No savings, you're going to run out of money, you're going to go broke, you're eventually going to default on your debt, and that's what happens. That is what's going to happen. Because in the long run, that's not sustainable. In the short run, it's a good high. It's what I would call a stock market high. You feel like you're wealthy, and you've got a lot of money to spend. You're a big time spender. But bottom line is, it eventually, you got to wake up the next morning with the hangover that comes with it, and ultimately you're broke. Why can we realize that individually? I think even the youngest people can understand that. When you've got your 7-year-old and they go out there and they work and they they're doing little chores, and you're paying them a little money here or there so that they can understand the concept of finances. And so now they get their money and they immediately spend it, right? And then something comes along that costs more than their allowance. So the next thing you know, they're like upset about that, right? So the first thing they try to do is they try to borrow money. First they try to get grandpa to pay. Pop will pay. But assuming I won't pay, which sometimes I will, a lot, probably most of the time I will. But let's say Pop will pay, and mom and dad aren't paying because they would be paying every single day. So mom and dad aren't paying. So now they've got it. Oh, well, can I have an advance against my allowance? I really want this, and I want it now. I need to have this right now. Can you give me the extra $2 from next week? Because I really need to get this, and I only have $2 and it's $4. And so what happens? Well, if the parent is smart, the first thing they do is they'll give it to them. Say, here you go. Here you go. And then next week, when they've worked all week and they've done their chores and you've made them continue to do their chores, and they want to buy something, and you say, well, sorry, you don't have any money. And they say, well, can I borrow? Well, no, you already borrowed your allowance. So now you have to continue to work. Now they're working and doing their chores, and there's nothing coming to them. That's a problem. They hate that. So they learn real quickly that, it doesn't make sense to spend your money and then have to do all this work for nothing. That's teaching them about taxes. You do all this work, they tax it away. You have nothing, to spend, and that's kind of demoralizing. So you've taught them the good lesson. Don't give up your money easy. Don't borrow your money that you have to, now you're giving up everything you're making to get it back. And so what happens the next time? The next time you tell them, well, put some money aside from this week, and then next week after you've earned your money, put some money aside from that week, and then maybe the next week You can use some of your money, but not all of your money to buy what you want to buy. Just plan it out a little bit. Be patient. You don't have to have it today. You can wait 3 weeks from today. And then they learn to save, right? They learn to postpone their gratification and to save a little bit of money. We all learned that at a young age. But all of a sudden, when some economist gets on stage someplace with some politician and says, no, 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 if we boost minimum wage, you guys will all have more money and you'll spend that money, and that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. Saving it would be a good thing. What happens when you save money? Well, in the economy, what happens when you save money is that money stays in the economy and is lent to somebody else who is trying to who's trying to build something, who's trying to do something. That money is being reallocated. It's in the stock market, so it's creating jobs. It's somewhere. Savings is a good thing. Savings produces income. So to say that spending is good and savings is bad we all know is not accurate. Ultimately, savings becomes spending, but it's a case of the savings is still being utilized. It's not sitting on the shelf wasting away. It's being utilized. Now, let's talk about what we spend. If I'm at minimum wage and that's where I'm at right now, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to spend because I have to. There's no money left over for savings at $15 an hour. There's just, or $10 or $12. You're not putting any money aside. By the time you get your housing costs and have a place to live, you're out of money. So let's face it, I'm going to spend it. They are right on that. If I give you a raise from $12 to $15 an hour, you're going to spend it. You're not going to put it into savings most likely because, frankly, you couldn't afford the $12 an hour. You had to work multiple jobs. So what you're going to do is a couple things. You're either going to reduce your second job. You're not going to work another job because maybe you don't have to. Well, now that in effect may cause a problem for somebody else, the other employer that you were working. Now they have to have a part-time person who is also willing to work for the same amount of money, and their costs have gone up. So they were going to eliminate potentially that position anyway. So what's happened? Well, I raised minimum wage, but I eliminated jobs because that second job, they can't afford it anymore because they got to pay too much for it. And at some point they may look and say, well, you know what? I'm paying $20 an hour to, I'm paying, 15 or $20 an hour to my other workers. And, instead of hiring a person and having all of the possibilities of benefits and all of that, I'll just pay them a little overtime. And I'll reduce my hours a little bit, and then I'll stop my output. I just won't sell as much. I won't be able to afford to. I won't be able to afford the labor. So what happens is people shift costs. But let's say that person, they're going to spend that extra $3. They're going to, when they go from 12 to 15, they're going to spend that $3. And the economists are saying that's a good thing because it's going to create other benefits. It's going to create other jobs. Well, we know it's not. When you increase the wage here, you're taking the wage away from someone else. Or you're reducing the materials costs. Maybe the person's going to buy the company that they're buying from now are going to buy their materials from China because that's the lowest cost. And in fact, I will guarantee you that to the extent that I'm on the low end of the income scale, the products that I purchase are going to be cheaper. I can't afford organic. I can't afford I can't afford the car that has the low emissions because I can't afford a new car. I've got to buy a used car most likely. So frankly, because of my wage, I'm paying a much higher interest rate. So my cost of that car is much higher than it would be for somebody else. So I'm paying a higher price for a used vehicle that probably has lousy emissions, definitely bad safety. So I put my family and myself at risk because I'm buying a vehicle that I have to buy, but at least it's taking it away from other transportation costs that might have cost me a lot of money. So it's my cheapest form of, maybe my cheapest form of transportation, but I'm buying food and materials at at the store that is the cheapest that I can buy, which means that the manufacturer is using the cheapest material they can buy. Why do you think that when this whole thing with the pandemic started, and remember we had the hurricane mentality where all of the toilet paper in the world was sold, and for the next 6 years where the toilet paper was sold, and all of this stuff went off the shelf, and then the only thing left on the shelf was what? It wasn't Publix brand, right? It wasn't Winn-Dixie brand. That stuff had all gone because that was the cheaper stuff, right? It wasn't any of that. What was left? It was the high quality stuff, the organic, the great bread, the high quality meat, and all of that kind of stuff. Why? Well, because it was the most expensive. Most people couldn't afford that, especially if they weren't working. They were at home. So tell me again who the pandemic affected the most. Well, when you have to have milk and you have to have food and you have to have cereal and you have to have those kind of things, you buy what you can buy. You didn't have the opportunity to select the lowest cost product. So it cost the poor a lot more than it did everybody else. So when you create a reduced output of dollars being invested, where people have a limited amount of money that they can spend, they're going to spend it as frugally as they can. But at that end of the pay scale, the products that you're going to buy are going to be cheaper. Is that good? Is that good for the economy overall? Is it good if what we did was we paid somebody $13 an hour? I mean, $15 an hour. We increased their pay $3 an hour, and that gave them a little more money to then be able to buy products that created jobs in China. Was that a good thing for us and for our economy? Is that the type of investment that this economist was talking about? They're going to buy more things. But if they're buying more things that are made outside the United States, didn't that cost us? Didn't our tax dollars, our money that's going to support that because we did that, isn't the loss of jobs? Didn't we lose a job in the United States and create a job in China or India or Pakistan? Was that what we intended to do? Absolutely not. But that is what will happen, because that's the fact of the matter. That's the economics of the transaction, is that the market will gravitate to where it values the product. And at that point, if I'm at a point where I have some disposable income, let's say I'm making that $70 an hour, I'm at that disposable income, I can choose and say, look, from a cost standpoint, I want organic meat because I think that's better for my health and it's a better thing for me. Even though I could buy this meat that's coming from who knows where a lot cheaper, right? That's a decision I can make when I have excess disposable income. When I'm making $15 an hour, trying to feed a family of 4 on $30,000 a year, that ain't happening. I'm buying the cheapest thing I can buy. If that's made in China, I don't care. My mask is made in China, I don't care. I have to buy it. That's what I've got to buy. That's all I can get. That's what I can afford. If I got to wear one of these things every single day, I got to take it off and throw it away 100 times. I'm buying the cheapest thing I can, because I can't afford, $35 or $40 a day for masks, right? So otherwise, I could buy all these masks in the United States, and I can buy them and make them disposable and not. But what am I going to do? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come up with some compromise. Either I'm going to buy Chinese, I'm going to buy German, which is more expensive, or I'm going to buy from Evan, who's got tons of them in stock, and they're probably all good stuff. But anyway, so it's important to hear what the people say and then think about what makes sense. And a lot of this is really getting back to my original comment about pulling back the curtain and looking at the wizard. A lot of this is really just sitting back and logically saying, does that really make sense? I mean, I know I don't understand economics, but I do understand that if I can make it 15, then why can't I make it 70? So that must mean if I can't make it 70, I can't make it 15. One of the things that I heard an economist or a politician, it wasn't an economist, a politician say is, if you really look at it, we had minimum wage increases during Republican administrations. Yeah, absolutely you did. Because wages were going up in general and the minimum wage was non-existent. It didn't make a difference. When you have a need for labor and there's not enough labor, the demand for labor is high and the supply of labor is low, you're going to pay whatever. Minimum wage is no longer a factor because it is not even in play. You're not hiring somebody for $10 an hour, $7 an hour. Even if you could, you're not. It's costing you 10, 12, 15. So naturally you're going to raise the minimum wage at that point. What difference does it make? It's a good political move because it costs nothing because there's nobody being paid that. So, the minimum wage tends to be a bottom level. It's the threshold level and it pushes everything else up. So if minimum wage is 15, all the other wages go up above that by the same or a proportional amount, a percentage amount. So the bottom line is when they say that's it's true, but it's not true. It's true. Yes, they did raise the minimum wage, but they could have raised it because the wage itself, the actual wage was higher than that. So it had no impact on the economy. Having a price way below market makes no difference. If I'm going to, or way above market makes no difference. If I'm going to do that, it doesn't impact it. So that's kind of the smoke and mirrors concept that you hear, and it's really not it's not true when you follow it all the way through. And that's why. So there's a lot of talk about minimum wage. I heard Pelosi the other day say the reason she's holding this back is she wants this federal minimum wage. Well, think about it. And so if I have to have a minimum wage that's appropriate to live in New York City, I'd take that minimum wage in Utah. So what's going to happen? People are going to shift. So now what you're doing is the only people you're going to punish are the people who can't move. Who is that? Lower income, right? They're the ones that are stuck where they're at. That's the job they have. They can't afford to change jobs. They can't afford to move out of the area. They have their support staff there, their grandparents and all that kind of thing. So anyway, that's just a little something to think about. Think about, again, when their lips are moving, they might be lying because that's usually the way it is. So thanks for joining us. We'll talk about some of these issues again next Wednesday right here on WSTU from 9 to 10 o'clock. WSTU, we are Martin County's Heritage Station.